Welcome back to another reading and correcting of Bottom Rung with me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger's Supervisor. We are doing chapter 43 today. Tibs enjoyed the porridge, possibly too much. It was the third bowl Krosef was bringing. Brought him. That's something else I'm trying to do. Change any was something combination. Um, Most of the time, there's a better word for it, a better one word for it. Sometimes the context requires you to leave it, but if you know, this was the third bowl Krosef brought him. You're up early, the server commented. The sun was just starting to shine through the windows. Late, Tib said, finishing the bowl and pulling the other one before him. I did stuff through the night. This was the last bowl, he promised himself. He shouldn't eat so much. Krosef plopped down in the chair after looking the nearly empty room over. Have you finally found yourself someone to spend the night with? He asked with a grin. Tibbs narrowed his eyes at the server and lowered his voice. What has Jekyll said? He did his best not to make the question an accusation. Nothing? Krosef leaned forward and lowered his voice conspiratorially. Why? Is there something I should know? I'm not interested, Tibbs replied flatly before going back to eating his food. You're still young, Tibbs, Krosef said wistfully. You'll meet someone, and then you won't ever be without them. Shouldn't you be working? Tibbs asked, and the words had more bitterness to them than he intended. The server motioned to the still empty room. The still nearly empty room. Pa isn't going to get on my case until a few more of the tables are occupied. For now, I just have to watch for someone wanting something, so we can talk. Tibbs stifled a sigh. Like Jackal, Krosef meant well, but Tibbs wasn't like them. When he watched the two of them, he didn't only see their happiness. He saw Krosef, devastated at learning Jackal hadn't survived the dungeon. This wouldn't cause that to someone else. If that meant you only had friends and no one special, he was okay with that. Tibbs looked at the spoon of porridge as his appetite deserted him. That was how Bardic saw the situation he was in, although a more extreme view than what Tibbs had just admitted to himself. Are you okay? Krosef asked, looking at him with concern. He lowered the spoon. Something I've been told sort of sank in too deeply. Every time Jackal or his guy talked about how Tibbs would, one day, find someone, it annoyed him. But that was sort of what he'd done with Bardic. Must have gone through your heart to make you look like this. Tibbs pushed the bowl away and Krosef stared at him. Right through your heart. I've never seen you push food away. Just runner stuff, Tibbs said and added so Krosef wouldn't worry. Not Jackal. Krosef smiled at him and patted his arm. If he told you something that made you push food away, he'd have told me his plan first. Do you want me to take it away? He motioned the bowl. Tibbs shook his head. I'll pass. It's going to get cold. I'll get you a warm bowl when you're ready. Tibbs caught the server's arm. It's still good cold. Krosef studied Tibbs. That's a street thing, isn't it? You aren't there anymore. Tibbs wanted to protest, claim it was a him thing, or that it wasn't actually a bad thing to be street. It just is. I shouldn't waste food. It won't be wasted. Someone let dogs loose in the town, and they're hungry enough to eat any scrap we give them. I'll finish it, Tibbs stated. Crow! The innkeeper yelled from the kitchen door. You and that runner of yours only get so much leeway. He motioned to the tables that had filled while the two of them talked. Talk with him later. Tibbs leaned around Krosef and waved at the older man. Hi, Tibbs. The innkeeper greeted him with a smile, which vanished as he set eyes back on his son. Get in here. Tibbs gets no leeway. You have tables to serve. Krosef stood. Are you sure about the bowl? Tibbs nodded and moved it closer. Eating would help him put Bardic out of his mind. Hey, guys! The woman called as she approached the group. Pyan! Tibbs took off to hug her. You're still alive! She chuckled and hugged him back. It's not like I was able to do a run after the one we did together. Jekyll, Karina, good to see you two are still with us. She offered her hand to the other fighter and they clasped forearm. Tibbs won't let us die. Jekyll said with a shrug. And you saw how I am. I just can't refuse him anything. But Karina continued, and Tibbs is kind of almost and Tibbs did the almost dying for us when he threw himself off a cliff. I fell. Tibbs grumbled, and to Jekyll and Karina's amusement, while Maz and Cumdar looked as confused as the people with Payan. Now I remember why the run with you was so fun, Jeff said with a shake of the head. Did you really fall off? Excuse me, a thin woman said, but Karina's hug stopped her from speaking. Tandy, I'm so glad you found a team that's working for you. That's working out for you. The rogue gave a strange smile as she looked around the training field. She hesitatingly placed her arms around the sorceress. Thank you, she stammered the next word and tried again. Please let go of me. You know I don't like. She trailed off. Karina immediately backed away. I am so sorry, I forgot. She motioned to the other. That's Jekyll and Tibbs. These are Mez and Cumdar. Hello, Mazzano. Tandy greeted the archer shyly. It's good to see you aren't with Don anymore. The archer squirmed, and Tibbs thought he might be blushing, but with his dark skin, it was hard to be sure. Hey, Tan. Thanks. This guy's kind of saved me, and they aren't as bad as they appear. Jekyll cursed softly, and Tibbs glared him into staying silent. Now was not the time for something snarky. The fighter sighed and threw his arm up in defeat. I'm glad, Tandy said. That sorcerer had no right to force you to be on his team, and if Karina is with them, they must be good people. Tibbs glared at the fighter or harder, and Jekyll gave him an innocent look as innocent as a look as he could manage. It's clear you two know each other. A sorcerer in bright green robes stepped around the still blushing rogue and offered his hand to Cumdar. I'm Amid, sorcerer and one-day ruler of the forest of Teltirac. I am Cumdar of Temerity, he replied, looking at the hand uncertainly, then grasping the forearm the way the fighters had done. Cleric. The following silence was only broken by the sound of training further away as Payan team stared at the cleric. We need to come up with something else, Jekyll said. This could be a problem. Why? Because they're no longer looking at you? The fighter beamed. You know me so well, dear. How did you score a cleric? A tall man in leather armor asked. I thought they weren't joining they weren't joining teams for at least another level. And you are? Jekyll asked, looking the man over in appreciation. Taken? Payan replied, smirking. Jekyll opened his mouth, closed it. I did something like that to you, didn't I? She grinned. You did, but he is taken, aren't you, hon? Taken and branded, the fighter said, proudly pushing the collar of his armor down to show a red mark. Payan Stan's face became much darker. That was an accident, she stammered. I got carried away. No need to be bashful, Payan, Jekyll said. Enthusiasm is a good thing. Ask me about the mark my man leaves on me when you don't have any training plans. She put her face in her hand. I so don't want to see that. Jekyll laughed, and he offered his arm to the other fighter. Well met, Taken. I'm Jekyll. It's Carl, actually, the man answered, grasping the forearm. Earth element. Same here, Jekyll said. What about you, Tandy? Void, Mez said, as the woman finally stopped looking at the ground and showed her golden eyes. Mez looked at her, eyes wide, and cursed. I'm sorry, I shouldn't. She laughed. It's all right. My eyes give away my element, just like yours do, Mez, I know. Still, he protested. It wasn't my place to. Mez, Jekyll interrupted the archer. When a woman says it's okay, the proper response is to bow your head and respond with, "My lady is too gracious. Don't make too much of a mess. Don't make too much of an ass of yourself. That's my job." To make an ass of himself, Karina declared, not to make one of Mez. Tandy covered her mouth as she chuckled. You have found yourself an odd team, Karina. These two remind me of being home, she replied. I have brothers who are kind of like them. Mazzano? Tandy asked, glancing at the archer, then the ground again. We're still working things out, so tell me to stop and I will. The rogue looked at Karina, eyebrow raised. I have eyes, Tandy, the sorceress said with a chuckle. He's a good-looking guy. I'd give him a chance if I thought he was available. Mez cleared his throat, but before he opened his mouth, Jekyll cut him off with a loud whisper. Women are fighting over you. Do not interrupt. This seems to be more of a negotiation as to whom? As to whom is in a position to get the most out of our archer, Commodore said. Am I supposed to be flattered? The archer asked, confused. Why wouldn't you be? Jekyll asked. Because I should be the one wooing one of them, Mez answered. And which one would you be wooing? Tandy asked, all amusement leaving her face. Tibs backed away. He hadn't expected people other than Jekyll and Crosef to have those kind of arguments. The archer looked from Carino to Tandy, then back, his expression serious. With a curse, Jekyll covered the archer's mouth as he opened it. You, Tandy, he's going to woo you. He moved his mouth to the archer's ear and lowered his voice as the man protested. She's a void rogue. You're in enough danger as it is. Don't anger her any further. I don't have any archers in mind to replace you yet. Mez pulled the hand from his mouth. Of course I was going to say Tandy. He glared at the fighter. How would I have sounded if I just blurted it out? I have to assure her I consider her the better choice. Carina shook her head, and Tibs took another step back. You do know that if this was anyone other than Tandy, I'd blast you, right? Did you want me to pick you? The archer asked, sounding more confused. Of course not, but being referred to as inferior to one isn't as the inferior one isn't nice. She looked at Tibs, and father smiled at the distance, now separating him from everyone else. I'm starting to agree with you about not getting anyone special. I'm not liking how guys behave when they're around their special someone. Jekyll clapped his hand back over the archer's mouth. And this time it didn't move. To Carina he said, You do know there are women out there too, right? I'm well aware, she replied, but I want a man. Amir cleared his throat. I'm going to start by saying I have absolutely no idea what's going on right now, but I am a man. Can you trip over your tongue any time you look at me? Carina asked, looking at him. How about insulting me without meaning to? Why would I ever want to do that? The sorcerer replied, horrified. Jekyll never plans on doing those things, Tibs said, returning to the group now that it felt safe. And I'm stabbed in the back, Jekyll sighed. I'm a rogue, Tibs said. It's kind of what we do. But you're supposed to be my rogue. Tibs looked around. Anyone have coins? The fighter forgot how rogues think. May I ask? Commodore asked while Carl took his coin pouch off his belt and Carina looked through hers. I was under the impression this was to be a training session. It has begun to look suspiciously like a theater troupe, and not a particularly good one at that. It is, Jekyll said, sounding serious and releasing the archer. We're looking to work on team cohesion, like I explained yesterday, he told Payan. Our next run is the first one we'll do with the 5 of us, and the first one with Commodore. And the first one for Commodore. Can a cleric even fight? Carl pointed to the staff Commodore held. I was under the impression clerics stayed at the back and made sure we all survived. Ours is special, Jekyll said proudly. Let us not turn this into another comedy routine, Commodore said as Payan opened her mouth. I will not go into explanations, regardless of how much you might insist, but it should be obvious I am not of purity. The other team's leader looked at Commodore, her amusement vanishing. So you're just calling yourself a cleric, she said with a mocking chuckle. With all due respect, Lady Pian, I am not on your team, nor am I indebted to you. My team knows of my circumstances, and that is enough for us. Your attempt into goading me into an explanation is wasted. This is why I'm thinking we need to go with something other than cleric, Jekyll said. They're having this reaction, and they've been in the dungeon. You know things aren't always as clear as we want them, Pian. If you're reacting like this, I don't want to imagine how the nobles are going to react. Something tells me mocking isn't going to be all they do. So you believe him? Pian asked. He leveled his gaze on her. Pian, he's on my team. What I think of him isn't something I'll share. But if I didn't think his presence was going to help, he wouldn't be here. That's fair, she replied. I guess I haven't seen enough of the world to know everything about it. She inclined her head to Commodore. I apologize. The cleric returned the nod. But Carl's question remains, she continued. Can you fight with that? Commodore slowly spun the staff in his hands and nearly dropped it. Not yet. I have only recently acquired it. I have swung it, but I have neither struck nor blocked. Jeff, she called to the archer, I've seen you hit the rats with your bow in the boulder room. How do you think you can help Kumdar? Bow fighting? Miss asked. That's a thing? If you have a bow built for it, he unhooked his from his back. Tibbs remembered it being thicker than the other, but he hadn't considered why. I can show you at the same time, but your bow might not be able to handle it. All right, Jekyll called. I'm calling this individual training. Individual training. We can figure out team cohesion another day. You didn't think this through, did you? Payan asked. Hey, this is me you're talking about. I use my head to bash things. Jekyll pointed to Tibbs. I wanted him to be the leader for a reason. Then you go fight with the two fighters, Tibbs said, stepping up to the other rogue. Teddy was shorter than the others, except for Tibbs. Do you know how to throw knives? Shalene seemed surprised by his approach and question. I have some training in it, she finally said. Can you show me how? She looked around. There is nothing to throw here. To throw at here. She became more confident as she spoke. Maybe I can focus on how to hold your knife. Uh, if you throw at the ground, if you don't, a few throws at the ground if you don't think I'll damage your knives too much. Tibbs nodded. The ground was soft, so it wasn't like it could hurt his knife. Payan, is it all right if I teach Tibbs? Our leader noted as she, Jekyll, and Carl moved away. Carl's skin turned stone gray. That leaves us, Kirina told the mid, as Tibbs and Tandy stepped away. But I'm not sure if there's anything a wood sorcerer can teach near one, or the reverse. I agree, the man replied. But tell me, before you were caught, did you happen to come across the treaties by... Their voice faded until Tibbs was too far to hear. Did you really find the door leading to the boss room before anyone else? Tandy asked once she stopped. I don't know. They were at the edge of the training field. You could see the markers indicating the town limit. We were the first to open it, and I'd noticed it before that, but someone else could have seen it before that and not have the tools to open it. Since we can't talk about what happens in the dungeon, it's impossible to know who saw it first. But how did you know it was there? She asked. Even once the guards told us there was a fourth room, I had trouble finding it. Tiff shrugged. I just noticed how the colors didn't quite match the rest. You have better eyes than I do. I had to feel around. The door looks like it's made of stone. The door looks like it's made of stone like the walls, but it's a different material. Do you know about the key? He asked, taking out the knife from the bracer sheath. She took hers out of the one at her belt. I knew about one of the boulder in the corner turning, but it wasn't until I overheard another rogue talking I realized there was more than one. I found them on the next run. I found out after I opened it the first time. Someone filling a spot on our team mentioned it. I I used my water to unlock it. She nodded and looked at his eyes. They say it's because of your age that your eyes aren't showing your element. Tiff shrugged. That's what my teacher says. She eyed his armor. I can't wait to find something that will let me afford a good armor. Shouldn't take long. There's a second floor now. There's a second floor now. It's got to have better stuff than the first one. When when you do find something, see Darren at the shield and rope. He specializes in the kind of items rogues need. Thanks for the recommendation. She motioned for his knife and studied it once he passed it over. This isn't balanced right for throwing. She handed it back. If throwing knives is how you want to go, you'll want to invest in a good money into them. But you should wait until you know deep how to keep the dungeon from eating it. The dungeon eats our weapons? Oh, wow. That's stuck around. Ha! That. Hmm. Ah. Okay, that needs to be changed because I, I must have missed it in the previous pass. Okay, so I mean, it's that simple. There's a way to stop it. I overheard some archery trainer debating if they should teach their student how to do it now instead of waiting until they graduate. You overhear a lot of stuff, Tibs said, smiling. Uh, he wondered how someone who couldn't sense the essence around them would go about using it to protect their weapons. Or was part of the question the trainers were debating, including teaching that aspect early. People tend to overlook me in crowds, she said with a shy smile. Tibbs nodded, and she began showing him how to properly grip the handle, but he had trouble focusing on it. If he could figure out how if he could figure out how someone could manipulate essence without sensing it, he could teach the other, maybe even Tandy. He wasn't sure if he could teach something he wasn't supposed to know yet to someone on another team, but it would be nice if he could repay her for the help she gave him. And this concludes chapter 43 of Bottom Rung. If you are enjoying this, please subscribe, hit the bell, hit the thumbs up, share with your friend in the world. If you want to read the whole story, it is on Royal Road. The link is in the notes, along with the link to my Patreon should you want to support me. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.